0, 1. Let's get started. Ashe, everyone. This is the Goddess Innocence, and I know it's been a minute since you've seen much from me. My apologies for that. It was definitely not intentional. Interesting, the card that came up also, and I just want to talk to you a little bit about the card, and especially in relation to personal journey right now, so bear with me. All right, so the card that came up is the Gatekeeper, and it came up inverted. And first of all, before we even really dive into what inverted meanings are on tarot, oracle cards, divination cards, let's just talk about the card itself, right? Because I'm going to say this. I know that not everyone has the same perspectives about the cards in the first place. So, let alone we have these same perspectives about the meanings when it comes down to these cards, right? And as I have this conversation with you, I may or may not kind of point out a few things that I want you to notice about the card and just see what you see. But while I talk to you about it, I'm going to hold it up so that you can actually see the card while I chit-chat about it. Because it's about the energy, not so much me. So with the Gatekeeper is a card that I created for the Forbidden Tarot expansion pack. And this particular card, in its inverted meaning, we'll get to that after I tell you what it means. It's an archetype that stands at the threshold between realms, offering the chance to access deeper mysteries. That can be personal mysteries. It can be mysteries in the world, just deeper mysteries. You apply it where it applies. The appearance of this card in a reading represents a pivotal moment of decision, right? So it's almost like being at a crossroads, but think about it like being at a threshold or being at a portal. And in a more traditional tarot card deck, this card would be akin to the High Priestez card. Okay. So back to this pivotal moment of decision, this is where the querent, or you as the person who's asking the question of your tarot/oracle cards, of your reader, your tarot reader, tarot advisor, would choose whether to step into the unknown or not. Now, the Gatekeeper card represents courage, protection, and the wisdom required to navigate liminal spaces. So that's for the collective. Here we go. And I'm going to actually turn the card right side up so that you can see it again in its full glory. You can screenshot it, actually, might help. Okay, and because of the lighting, essentially what I was trying to do is rotate this a bit, right, so that you can see. This card I created with a lot of shadow and dimension, so to speak, but in its present form, depending on the lighting, some of that might get a little remiss. All right, here we go. So if this card has been drawn for you, and let's just say, for the sake of argument, that this was your tarot advisory session that I was giving you, right? Starting with the expansion pack is more or less, if you want to play with it in that sense, a card for helping you to kind of like navigate the question, or like focus the energy of your question. Say if you just weren't quite sure, you had a question that was on your mind and you weren't quite sure if you were on the right track, you can use this deck and any oracle deck for that matter to help you like guide and hone your question in, or to just really help you to kind of like zone in, right, and focus in on what sort of energetic space you're in at that time. So that would really help. And then you can move from there onto your actual tarot card. And since I am giving you guys an example of a tarot advisory session, I would say that if this card is coming up for you, right, there's lots of, as you can see, celestial bodies back here. There's also this light that appears to be shining down here, right? And it's like this being is a being of light that's also reflecting the light, right? So even if this card showed up in the inverse as it did, what this is saying is that there is a polarity that you seem to be operating in. You're operating in this polarity as energy where, think about this more or less as the hanging one. And I'm going to show you, or attempt to show you, the other two cards that I'm referencing from the Forbidden Tarot, that is. So like when we're talking about the High Priestess energy, I want to give you guys an example of what I mean in case you're not sure what that looks like visually. So the High Priestess in the Forbidden Tarot is Miss Thang. Right? And the Gatekeeper, again, is picking up on that energy. And as well, it picks up on the energy of, in a more traditional tarot card deck, we'd call it the Hanging One or the Hanged Man. How it got into being about just man. In that sense, you have to remember that although tarot is pretty taboo still in a lot of different places, in a lot of different spaces, that there is still a lot of reference, a lot of biblical reference to that. And so with that, you see a lot of patriarchal references. Hence, man. And for those of you who don't believe me, I implore you to please look this up. But one of the most popular tarot card decks out there, at least the system, the RWS, better known as Rider-Waite-Smith, right? The creator of that deck was actually a religious man. So, do with that information as you will, but I'm just letting you know that's how that went. So that's why you see a lot of still very patriarchal, right, and quite biblical references within that tarot card deck if you really pay attention. Now here is my, now she is inverted at the time because this is my Hanging One, better known as that Ole Bat. And this is definitely a play on words here. But if you see, I've got bats in the foreground of this card. And just in case you missed that, the major arcana in the Forbidden Tarot is actually set against a stained glass backdrop. That was very intentional, by the way. And it's very much in reference to the fact that matriarchal lineages for millennia were seen as the epitome of spiritual and intellectual and emotional wisdom and intelligence and so many other things. And it's a direct reference to retelling the story of the divine femme and her erasure from the spiritual, right? From the mundane, removing and separating realms and telling you that mystical is one thing and it lives here, and the mundane is something else and it lives here, and that you no longer need spiritual protection, and telling you to follow very patriarchal rules and go into a certain space. Anyway, let's not go there just yet, but because I could. But it's really redefining what it means to be. And the erasure of the divine feminine. Let's go, because, oh my gosh. Okay, so apparently you're getting to see. I am the Goddess Innocence. I am not a follower of patriarchal religious systems, as you can tell. And if you can't, I don't know why not, because she bring it to you every time. But anyway, and I am, amongst other things, High Priestez, tarot advisor, and spiritual sexologist. So, you're welcome. So back to the cards. I've really been at a crossroads. Oh my gosh. To show you how true this is. So, confession. My reading. Just happen to be sharing with the energy of you guys, because I know that there's someone else out there who's also been struggling with this. And for as much as I've invested in myself and in following my path, even admitting that and saying it out loud, right, like on a platform like this, has been something that I've been in and out of for quite some time. And I'll tell you a little bit more about that at another time. But all that being said, knowing for a very long time that there's more of a gatekeeping sort of process, and there's certain gatekeepers that are necessary, right? But only when they're walking in the light of truth. The polarity of that is the gatekeeping that continues to go on, where these sorts of truths have been frowned upon. And dare I say, let's get into that topic of witch hunting, especially when it comes down to us, right? Us. That we've been relegated to the shadows, and all the wisdom and all the knowledge that we have and have had, all the wisdom that was passed on by our ancestors when it comes down to stuff like this, has been demonized and vilified. Please look it up. I encourage you, do your own research. And so these sorts of things is one of the reasons why I chose to name my tarot card deck as the Forbidden Tarot. That's the reason why. And that reference right there, follow the rabbit. We'll talk about that later, but you'll get it. So back to what I started telling you about this card in our tarot advisory session, right? Being in the inverse here has been like being between the energy of the High Priestess, which is my calling, and being in the energy of that Ole Bat, the Hanging One. And when I turn the Hanging One upside down, so when I invert that, because this card showed up in the inverse, right? So it actually read that Ole Bat this way, because it would be the equivalent of these two cards put together with that Ole Bat inverted, right? And I know some of you who don't really understand tarot are like, what are you talking about? What are you talking about? If you look, you see that together, these three cards actually make up this divine sort of trinity, right? Or the divine femme. Three different faces of unity. And when I say the divine femme, I'm not speaking solely about someone in the body of a woman. But at the same time, I am. Because we're talking about quieting and stilling that energy, and we're talking about demonizing that energy of being someone and something that is spiritual and reverent and seen as wise and all-knowing, and someone who owns their authenticity and their nature. And as you'll see in all three of these cards, there's like this crown as well. A halo, a crown, right? Crown, chakra energy, wisdom, knowledge. Her crown with the crystals. And this one intentionally is actually more of a triple crown reference. If you'll notice, the African head wrap here, the crystals here, and the halo in the background, right? Just sharing with you some things about breaking down these cards when you see them. And then when we talk about that Ole Bat, especially her being inverted, right? You see her crown as well, with the reference to the serpent energy here. And then you may or may not pick up that there's fangs here, right? In addition to the bat. And what does that mean when you put it all together? Well, what that means essentially is that as societally for so long, femmes like me were, and somewhere we still are, seen as sacred gatekeepers. Sacred gatekeepers. I'll show you again, sacred gatekeepers of certain knowledge and certain wisdom and certain abilities. And there were times when it was seen as a good thing and a wise thing and a sacred thing and a beautiful thing. And then somewhere along the way that was circumvented, and it started to become this thing that was too dangerous. Too dangerous for the masses to know about, too dangerous for the masses to practice. And so off and on, it's been slowly but surely demonized, right? And relegated to the shadows. So well, all that comes into play, and what does that have to do with this reading? Well, that has to do with when you're seeing a card like the Gatekeeper show up inverted. What that means is that you are operating in that energy of feeling like your divine gifts, your sacred gifts, your very presence even, is something that you are in this sort of shadowy realm, and you are at this point, at this perspective where you feel like you need to make a decision about whether or not you're going to cross into that threshold or not, right? Like, where are you in your life? Are you at a place, are you in a space where you feel like things just aren't going right and you need to make a change, where you feel like there's this mystery surrounding who you are and who you present to be, right? Are you showing up authentically in this world? Are you letting people know who you really are and what it is that you do? Or are you still hiding? Because personally, I can tell you, I have hidden in plain sight, and I've also hidden from myself at times and not always even realized that. But when I've come to that realization, right, it's not something that, it's confession time, it's not something that is easily admittable even to yourself. And then even once you admit it to yourself, right, and you accept it, it's where do you go from there? Okay, so that's just personal difference with that. And so if you don't know, and when I tell you, like, it's a decision that really kind of, I'll show you this, really pulls at the heart, really weighs on the heart, right? Because sometimes the last person we want to admit things to is ourselves. And even when we admit it to ourselves, we come circle back to this thing about we have to do something about it, right? Because it calls for you to either stay where you are, and oftentimes that involves feeling stuck, or to move on. And so Miss Thang here represents that wisdom, that counsel, that divine knowledge, that very enigmatic being, right? That stands, as I said, on like one pillar. So think about traditional tarot cards, right? Where you'd see those two pillars of justice on either side of her. One here and one here. So you also see those two pillars represented in the gatekeeper card here and here. Yet again, you see them in that Ole Bat here and here. Where this card comes in is that divine gatekeepers are not always what they seem. And it also has to do with the unity of divine masculine and divine feminine energy. We're talking about intuition and logic, by the way. It just depends on who you're talking to when it comes down to those terms and how they're used or misused. So I'll say that to say that when I'm talking about this, I'm talking about we've been divorced from uniting our intuition and our logic, and from that being acceptable and being okay. But in times of the Great Mother being recognized and celebrated, and I didn't say worshipped, I said celebrated and honored, right? In a time of honoring the wisdom of our ancestors, we knew that, we remember that, we were taught that. So with that Ole Bat, it essentially means that that sort of energy has been turned into more of a satanical sort of thing, something that is definitely not welcome in this time and space still. But I'm gonna get to this point, and because I want to keep this relatively short, tarot advisory session that turned into so many other things for you guys. All right, so essentially what I'm saying is that for those of you who have been feeling, and to the ones that I'm truly talking to right now, it's like this isn't something that's brand new to you. Like you've been feeling for a while, like something is really off with this space and off with this place, right? That something is like truly off within your life. And if you look around, if you've been paying attention, right, you haven't gone down the rabbit hole, you've really seen that so many things just seem to be kind of upside down right now in your life and the lives of others around you. And again, just in this space. And if you've paid attention and put two and two together, and you know and you understand and you accept that we are spiritual beings having a human experience, and that you can't divorce logic from intuition, not at least without chaos ensuing, right? And that we seem to be kind of operating heavily in those times, and you know that something within you is calling for you to do a new thing in your life, I'm talking to you. If you're someone who's been questioning your reality and questioning where you're going and just what's going on in your life right now, one way that you can figure that out is through a tarot reading or through a tarot advisory session. Not the same thing, but very similar. And I will be sharing more of that with you. I am open to bookings. They are limited, by the way, but I do take commissions. So I will leave the information for you to check that out. And if you'd like just to chit chat, right, we can do that as well. So there's lots of ways that we can connect, but one of the best ways that we can connect is for you to stay tuned here for new information and for inspirational messages such as the one from the gatekeeper. And with that, I'm going to close this out for you with an offering from the Forbidden Oracle, because I'd never give you a tarot advisory session without closing it out with an oracle reading. That's one of the differences between tarot reading and tarot advisory. So that card comes to us. Oh my gosh, this is so from the Goddess and the archetype of Dot. Dot says that you are the seeker and the sanctuary. Screenshot. And as a matter of fact, I will have a screenshot of all these cards if you can't get one at this moment. And I'll put it probably as a, it'll be in the video. Put it to you that way. So Dot, yeah, I mean, that kind of says a lot. So Dot is what many of you know as death. Not death in the sense of particularly a physical death, but let's just say an ending, right? And an ending is nothing but a gate to a new beginning. So interesting how this circles back to the gatekeeper card that showed up in the beginning as the start of all this, right? Let's do it. And so what that has to do with the collective right now, look up by the way, what that has to do with the collective right now is that this is saying that you are standing at a threshold, and this is a very pivotal moment and decision. And I've already taken that leap by sharing this video and telling you all exactly who I am, for the most part, and what I do. And as a high priestess and as a goddess, as the Goddess Innocence, as a matter of fact, one of the ways that I serve a community is that I stand at the gate of life and death, symbolically speaking, spiritually speaking, meaning that not only am I a tarot advisory, one of my jobs as a high priestess is working as a death doula as well. And so that means that when we're talking about just like death or endings, right, transitions, I say death doula as in not necessarily like the end of a physical life, but the end of life, period. So like a spiritual life, a physical life, the beginning of that, meaning that I support those of you who are birthing in a new life. You take that how you will. And exiting from one life to the next. So birth and death doula. A full spectrum doula actually is what we would call that, but in the spiritual sense. In the spiritual sense. So I hope that is helpful. That is my truth. That is who I am as a gatekeeper, as a high priestess, and as a goddess. So you will be seeing more information like that from me coming up pretty soon. And I just wanted to let you guys know to never be afraid to speak your truth, and never be afraid to tell the world and show the world exactly who you are, because you're here for a reason. You have a purpose, and you have one life to live that purpose, or at least at a time, right? But while you have this life, while you have this one life right now, live it to the fullest. Be you, love you, get to know you. And if you don't know you, or you need help with that, you need help along this journey, even if it's not me, seek that help. Seek it from yourself. Oh yeah. Last thing I'll tell you about that for now. So, standing in my capacity as all the things, I hold space for showing you your own divinity, for supporting that. I'm not looking for clients to come running to me just for a reading, for a life reading, for an energy reading, for a tarot reading, for a healing, for none of that, right? My job, my sacred duty, is to show others how to do that for themselves, to teach you how to recognize in signs, whatever they be, right? Any kind of form of divination, to learn how to recognize those signs so that you can do it for yourself, to empower you to know that what you're being told is the truth. And not just to recognize it with the eyes, but to feel into that space, to see where it lives within you, and if it rings true, if it feels true. And to figure out with your own discernment what to do about that. That's where your power lies. It's not in coming to me. It's not in going to anyone else and saying, oh, I need a reason. Oh, I need a session. Oh, I needed this. Oh, I needed that. It is a part of the equation, right? That's it. It's about keeping each other accountable. So that's where I stand as a gatekeeper, is someone who has the tools, obviously, and who has the knowledge to be able to apply these things, but to counsel with you, to advise you on how to do it for yourself. So dream decoding, tarot, oracle, runes, pendulum, spirit boards, you name it. I'll let you, girl. The goddess will see you now. Until next time, I love you so much. Ashe. And thank you for supporting my share of the Forbidden Tarot. Promise more to come. Peace and blessings. Ashe.